day, everybody, and welcome to Bible class. Our text today is John chapter 12, not the entire chapter. It's a long chapter, so we're breaking it up in two. We're going to look at the first 19 verses or so of John chapter 12 today, that you and I might believe in Jesus as the Son of God. We've heard him in John's gospel describe himself as the living bread, the light of the world, the door, the good shepherd. He's provided all sorts of signs as to why we ought to believe him. Last Sunday, we beheld the greatest sign of all, right? Him telling Lazarus, who had been in the tomb, dead for 4 days, Lazarus, come out. And in John chapter 11, eyewitness John tells us, Lazarus came out. But not everybody believed the signs. Not everybody was willing to confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. We ended last Sunday, John 11, verse 53. From that day on, scribes, Pharisees, there were many Jews who made plans to put Jesus to death. We'll be in John 12 in just a moment. Could I point your attention to a prophecy that was 500 years old by the time we get to John chapter 12? 500 years before Jesus was born, God had inspired the prophet Zechariah in Zechariah 9 verse 9 to say, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." 500 years before Jesus was even born, God had provided that message through a prophet. Tuck that in the back of your mind as we dig into John chapter 12, verse 1, where John tells us it was 6 days before the Passover, that ancient Jewish festival where Jews remembered their deliverance from Egyptian bondage, right? When they would take the blood of a lamb and smear it on the doorposts, and as long as the angel of the Lord saw the blood, he passed over their houses and they were liberated from slavery. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came back to Bethany, where Mary and Martha and Lazarus lived, right? The Lazarus whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So those siblings gave a dinner for Jesus there. Martha served. Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. The other sister, Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard. This was very precious, very scarce, rare, expensive ointment. And she anointed the feet of Jesus. Remember what Jesus had done in raising her brother Lazarus from the dead. Now during dinner, she anoints the feet of Jesus with an extremely expensive ointment. And not only that, but she wipes his feet with her hair. As she does, the house is filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, John tells us Judas Iscariot is the one who is about to betray Jesus. Judas says, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii?" Do you hear how expensive this was? 1 denarius was a day's worth of wages for the average laborer. What Mary is using would cost almost an entire year's worth of labor. Judas says, why wasn't this taken and given to the poor? And John tells us, Judas said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Jesus speaks up and he tells Judas, leave her alone so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. What was Jesus talking about? We'll dig into that as a class. For now, he finishes his thought. The poor you have always with you, but you do not always have me. When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there in the house of Lazarus and Mary and Martha in Bethany, they came not only on account of him, but also to see Lazarus. No one had ever seen someone raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans, not just to put Jesus to death, but to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. Verse 12, the next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast in Jerusalem heard that Jesus was coming. Bethany to Jerusalem was just about a 2-mile journey. So when the crowd hears this, they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, Hosanna, Lord, save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Listen, even the King of Israel. And Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, just as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. Where had this been written? All the way back 500 years ago in Zechariah 9, verse 9. Who is Jesus? Well, there are lots of ways to answer that question. Here's one of them. He is the long-awaited king, all the way back in Zechariah's prophecy, who doesn't come in on a white stallion. He comes riding into the royal city on a donkey. And John tells us in verse 16, his disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified. What does he mean by that? We'll dig into that as a class. Then they remembered that these things had been written about him and had been done to him. The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to bear witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard he had done this sign. From beginning all the way through, this has been one of the key words that John has used to help us believe. Not everybody believed. So the Pharisees said to one another, you see that you are gaining nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. And they're determined to do something about that. We'll get back to them, Lord willing, next Sunday. For now, John has given us a lot to discuss as a class. Hope that I've set you up for good discussion. Let's make it a good one together.